Superintendent of the school district in East Chicago, Indiana. For 9 years, he was principal at 2 different high schools, one in Indiana, one in Illinois. He was vice principal at 2 other different high schools. He was a dean of students at a high school in East Chicago, Indiana. He was a Spanish teacher for several years at Washington High School in East Chicago, Indiana. Not only that, he taught Spanish at the college level at South Suburban College in Illinois and Indiana Wesleyan University in Indianapolis. He has a very long resume, and I am not going to read all of it, but I do have to highlight a few things that you probably don't know about Dr. Flores, because I didn't know this until I read his resume. He was a former Indiana State University wrestler. And you also may know that Dr. Veras, principal at Desert Wind, is a wrestler also, and Dr. Veras says that
And Dr. So they're both here tonight, so maybe we should...
And Dr. Veras says that there has been a wrestling challenge on the table for several years, and it just hasn't happened yet. So maybe tonight is the night, I don't know. Also, in addition, Dr. Flores was a former baseball, wrestling, soccer, and cross-country coach. He was a volunteer with Special Olympics for 20 years. He has numerous professional memberships. While in Indiana, he was president of the Hispanic Educators Society. I know he's been also involved with a similar group here in Phoenix. While in Indiana, he was on the West Point Academy Selection Committee. He was on the Purdue University Scholarship Committee. He implemented a district-wide elementary academic league in his school district in Indiana. So it's pretty fitting that he's here tonight to see the awards for our academic league that he started here in Maricopa Unified. In 1999, he scheduled and planned the launch of the first ever global distance learning event on February 29th, 2000, and formulated the naming of the school city of East Chicago as an official NASA site. I don't know of many school districts that are an official NASA site, but that's something that's pretty interesting from his resume here. Also implemented and introduced and implemented the first high school sailing class in the Midwest. So that sounds pretty cool. And then, of course, as an educator in Maricopa Unified, he was our superintendent for 4 years. He's been Santa Cruz principal for the last 3 years, and pretty remarkable tenure during that time. Literally built almost all of our schools. I believe there were 2 schools, Pima, Butte, and Santa Rosa, that were built when he got here. The high school campus was there, but it wasn't totally modernized yet. And during his tenure, he oversaw, directly or indirectly, somewhere around $170 million in construction, and quite an accomplishment for a superintendent in any state. And one of the things I appreciate most about Dr. Flores, working with him this year as principal, he's a very humble guy, and I thought it was just pretty interesting and appropriate that on his application letter dated January 9th, 2006, when he applied for the superintendent position here in Maricopa, his first sentence was, "Please accept this humble correspondence as my letter of application." And the application included the resume I just read to you. So Dr. Flores has been a great educator. He's had a great career. He's made great contributions to the Maricopa Unified School District. And I'd like him to come up here and get a round of applause.
Give them a big round of applause. Our parents and our students. Naturally, I want to thank the board everybody that's here, the support of everything that's done well in Maricopa Unified School District is a great district. It's only going to get better. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
You may have noticed I kept Dr. Flores' plaque, or clock rather. We're going to give it to him again in front of the staff on Friday morning, so.
Like regifting?
Yes, a little bit like gifting, but he said it was okay, so. Thank you, Dr. Flores. Next, we are going to present our Elementary Academic League Awards, and I will turn the mic over to Jane Tift and Janet Stensgaard.
Good evening, President Anderson, members of the board, Dr. Chestnut. My name's Janet Stensgaard. I'm an academic coach at Maricopa Elementary. This is Jane Tift. She's an academic coach at Saddleback. I wanted to give you just a background of Academic League starting in 2006-07. I was called into my principal's office and she said, there's something called the Academic League that Dr. Flores would like to get started. You girls have 3 weeks to get this team put together for our school. And so you try to wrap your brain around what that looks like. So those of you who are familiar with like High Quiz Bowl, they used to have it on TV when we're from the Midwest. That's basically how it started. When we would compete, we didn't have buzzers, and so we had popsicle sticks. And so there would be parents behind or teachers behind, and they would decide who was actually answered first. So looking back where we were to where we are today, we have buzzers. We've got it put together. The questions are standard based, and thanks to Jane Tiff, she went ahead and did that for us this year. So I want to thank her for making that possible for us this year. A lot of teamwork goes into making this happen, from volunteers who work at the competitions. We had 3 competitions and then a final in May. Our parents for supporting their students. Transportation for helping us get the students to the competition. So there's a lot of people and a lot of teamwork that goes through to this. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to have each team come up. We'd like to introduce the site coaches. Go ahead and bring your kids up with you, and we'll just have you stand up here. So we'd like to start with Saddleback, which is Tanya Nielsen, Kevin Connell, and Courtney Batista. If you could come up with your students, please. And we've invited 4th and 5th grade, that's who competed. Next is Butterfield, John McGuire, Carrie Russell, June Shull. Please come forward with your students. These are the Bobcats. And the next group is Maricopa Elementary. Coaches are Julie Sullivan and Alicia Coatney. These are the Diamondbacks. The next team is Santa Cruz. Coaches are Jamie Larson and Dr. Flores. And then we have Santa Rosa. Site coaches are Lorena Ellard and Heather Hubrich. If you could come up with the Scorpions, please. It was decided that all students would get a medal for participating. That was started by Corinne Ledbetter a few years ago, and we brought that back. So here are our 5 teams. We're going to call up the Pima Butte people in just a minute. So thank you. If we could go ahead, we'll go ahead and have you guys sit, and then we'll have Pima Butte come forward. So thank you. So we have the traveling trophies. This is bragging rights from year to year. So our winners of the 4th grade competition was Pima Butte. And we would like to have those students come forward as we call your name. Matthew Blodgett, Aslan Connor, Taryn Gleese, Jeanette Ford, Ronan Gray, Jacob Kellerman, Mason McCowan, Colin Sala, Bill Schroeder, and Owen Sabeda. This is our 4th grade team with their traveling trophy. You can stay there. We'll have the 5th grade come forward next. All right. 5th grade students are Catherine Goes, Landon Jones, Julia Lamus, Jordan Levy, Ethan Lackahans, Isabella Moe, Casey Swafield, Joshua Wagner, Serenity Williams, and Delaney, if you could come forward, please. Last but not least, we would like to call up the coaches for the Pima Butte people, which would be 4th grade Betty Graham, 5th grade Kristen Rakosi. It was a fun year. We're looking forward to next year. Thank you.
Congratulations to our academic league students. Good job. We're very proud of you. And it will not hurt my feelings at all if moms and dads want to make an exit now. My report is going to be good, but you know, it wouldn't hurt my feelings if you didn't want to listen to the rest of it. It's up to you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. Take a break.
Nobody hesitated to take me up for that offer. Okay, well, thank you to those of you that stayed for the rest of my report. I greatly appreciate this. We have a few other things to report on tonight, and one of them is Head Start recognition. As you probably know, it's really pretty amazing how many partnerships we have between Maricopa Unified School District and other organizations. And I think sometimes most people don't realize that, but there are a lot of like-minded organizations that are concerned with educating our students in Maricopa and in a variety of ways. And one of those examples is the Head Start preschool program. We have a close working relationship with them. And they wanted to give some special recognition tonight to a few of our staff members just for that good partnership work that's in evidence between Head Start and Maricopa Unified. And so there's actually 2 awards to bus drivers, and I don't know if they're here tonight. One is for Paul Schoch, and the other is for Javier Kowacek. Are either one of them here tonight? I thought I heard they weren't going to be able to make it tonight, but you know, you got to have transportation on board if we're going to transport kids, and I know they do a good job in that area. Also then, Head Start Volunteer Award certificate for outstanding volunteer service to the Head Start program during the past year goes to the entire Maricopa Special Services Department for that partnership and that close work. And the 2 people that kind of head that up for us are Danielle Kent and Phyllis Zambrowski. So I'd like them to come up and receive the certificate. Okay, moving on. Just some interesting and exciting news. Maricopa High School softball players earned athletic scholarships. This was announced on May 9th, right after our last meeting. And Alicia Portillo, on the left there, has been awarded a scholarship to Paradise Valley Community College. She'll pitch and play first base at Paradise Valley. And Alicia had quite an athletic career at Maricopa High School. She won 4 varsity letters in softball. She was team MVP every year. She had first team all-region awards this year. She was first team all-state in the 4A2 category. I think I'm reading that right. And she was honorable mention on the all-Arizona team. So a very great athlete for the Rams and going to continue playing in college. And of course, she's done a good job in the classroom too to make her eligible for that scholarship. So we're proud of her. And also, Crystalline Espinol, she won a scholarship to AIB College of Business in Des Moines, Iowa. She plans to play softball there, either outfield or first base, so we're really proud of our student athletes. 2 more, just announced recently. Connor Staves and Jaron Claiborne will be playing collegiate soccer at Jamestown College, which I believe is in North Dakota. And they both credit Coach Courtney Kellner's as being very helpful to them in their soccer careers. As Courtney Kellner's coaches both the high school team as well as the club team. I think it's called Barcelona. AZ. And so it's very exciting to see these students be able to continue athletically at the college level, and then of course the academics that go along with that. Very exciting stuff. I also want to report on the Maricopa Education Foundation 3rd Annual Teacher Appreciation Night, which was on May 11th, and that was my first time to attend that event. Very great event, and there were 300 people there. It was a very nice event, and really appreciate the Maricopa Education Foundation putting that on. They support us in a variety of ways throughout the year with mini grants, which help teachers do some very cool things in the classroom, and this was kind of a social event, but it was kind of a nice way to end the year and a really nice social occasion. A lot of stuff going on at the end of the year. So I did not attend this event. I believe I was at another event this night, but that was on May 16th was the MUSD Summer Splash, which was here. And the thing that was amazing about that event is that there were 500 people here.
Wow.
That was the grand total. And it was like an amazing lineup of people or organizations that helped with that, including Maricopa Fire Department, Police Department, Parks and Rec, Project WET, Maricopa Kids Care, Rotary Club with their swim school information, the Sunlight Dental Mobile Clinic. I was very busy that night. That was a big deal. There was a CPR refresher course. Banner Health was here. Auction Indian Community was here. Maricopa Public Library. So it was a popular event. I think free hot dogs also. No, I think you had to pay for hot dogs. They weren't free. I think the ice cream was free, but you had to pay for hot dogs. So it was a big event. I had the opportunity, that's where I was that night. On the 16th was the Maricopa High School Annual Evening of Honors, and it was pretty exciting to see $2 million, $5,000 in scholarship offers made to our students. And the vast majority of that scholarship amount, I believe about somewhere around $400,000, was from Arizona State University. Large chunk of that was from University of Arizona and then Northern Arizona University. But just some pretty amazing accomplishments by our students, and it was fun to be part of that. Very great event that night. So I'm still new to Arizona, and I didn't know about Water Day. I know that's a tradition at most schools, and a fun way to end the year. And I did not attend, but I just had to show you these pictures in case you missed them. Water Day at Saddleback. Mayor Christian Price was in the dunk tank, and that is him there on the left. And I didn't have room for the picture of him, like all you could see was the top of his head after he was dunked, you know. But he also went down the big slide. There he is in the middle, and Councilman Leon Potter was there also. And I know that's a big event. Kids really enjoy it. It's a fun way to end the year. I don't know if you caught this, but on the 20th, Fox 10 News was here for their morning program to cover the Maricopa in Motion program, which is really sponsored by Maricopa Parks and Rec, and it's really a service to Maricopa students. And they're filming at Butterfield, I believe, is where they were filming. And that's, as I understand that program, it's a summer program also. And they were covering that, good coverage. And there's actually, if you go to their website, there's a really great little video clip of that interview and the whole thing. So that was kind of cool. And this was really a big deal, in case you didn't hear about this. On the 21st, which I think was yesterday, Maricopa High School Senior Class Activity Day was really quite an event. And thank you to Dr. Ember Conley for coordinating this whole thing. I know it kind of came up late, and the high school was basically too busy to deal with this. So Dr. Conley said, I will make this happen, and she did, and I appreciate that. It turned out to be a great educational opportunity for our students, as well as a fun opportunity. And so, I mean, there were like 5 different groups involved with this thing. You can see their symbols up there. Started off, City of Maricopa, Councilman Bridger Kimball talked about, drinking and driving and, issues related to that. It was a very well done talk, kind of from the heart, and asking our students to, think and not make bad choices this time of year when they're celebrating. But then we actually had 4 speeches, and so next up was Chief Stahl. Maricopa Police Department had a very nice similar message. Did a great job. Lando Voiles, prosecuting attorney from the county, was there, and then Sheriff Paul Babot was there, and they just did a very nice job talking to our students about making safe choices. But the best part was that Sheriff Paul Babot brought a check for $5,000, which was from RICO funds, which really are funds, well, it's drug bust money is what it is. And that money can be used for drug and alcohol-free activities. So he presented that to the senior class. And of course, this was all prearranged. Thanks to Dr. Conley. And students, after those presentations, got on the bus and went out to the Multi-Attainment Center out at Bach Chin. And the thing that was very cool about that, it was really about $15,000 worth of stuff, because the kids got lunch, they got unlimited bowling and laser tag, they had the opportunity to see a movie, and when they went to the movie, they got popcorn and pop and some candy. And so it was underwritten, most of it was underwritten by Multi-Attainment Center, which we really appreciate. So it was a great partnership opportunity. I think it was a fun activity for our kids and educational at the same time. So thank you, Dr. Coleman. Last night was my second annual 8th grade Unification celebration, and that was a great event. And I like that picture because it was a beautiful evening. It kind of captures the sky last night. And I was very impressed with the behavior of our students. And Mr. Abel, Dr. Barros told me that our students would be all dressed up and behave well. And I thought, I hope that's true, and it was. The behavior was excellent. The students looked very sharp, and it was a very nice evening, great way to honor them in that milestone in their life. Just a huge crowd, and it was a really nice event, which I enjoyed. And as you know, we have Maricopa High School graduation ceremony tomorrow night. It starts at 7:30 p.m., so a little later than the Unification ceremony. And board members requested to be there at 7:15. We'd like you on the stage, so that's coming right up tomorrow night, and guaranteed perfect weather. Also want to remind you about our Best of the Best all-staff breakfast, which is Friday morning at 8 a.m. in the PAC. We'll be honoring and recognizing staff members who do these four things: make a difference in student achievement, demonstrate uncompromising excellence, demonstrate service, and demonstrate dedication to the district. So it'll be a fun event. We have a plaque for the grand prize winners in each category, and we're going to be honoring retirees at that time also. So it's going to be a good deal. And you are invited. I also wanted to let you know that we'll be interviewing for Pima, Butte, and Santa Cruz principals on Friday also. We have some excellent candidates, and both interview teams will be interviewing at the same time in separate rooms. So we are interviewing 6 candidates. We have 6 excellent candidates, so we're looking forward to that. Those are big positions, important positions that we need to fill, and we have interview teams from each school. I'll be heading up one interview team. Dr. Conley will be heading up the other interview team. So hopefully at our next board meeting, we'll have 2 names to recommend to you for hiring in our principal positions. So we're really looking forward to that. An update on our Auction Community $2.6 million grant. That's something obviously we're very thankful for and appreciative of. A very generous gift from Auction Community. And we don't have much to report on right now. Our next step is to finalize the memorandum of agreement between Auction, the City of Maricopa, and us. And I anticipate that'll be one document that all 3 parties will sit down and finalize. And so we've been in the process of scheduling that. We haven't got it on the calendar yet, but we have talked about possible dates and had a couple of meetings with the city to prepare for that meeting. So I think we're going to be in good shape once that meeting occurs. And then we'll be bringing you a memorandum of agreement in the near future to approve. So that's something to look forward to. And once that memorandum of agreement is approved, then we can start talking about how to implement those funds. There will obviously be some things that will be designated, funded in the memorandum of agreement, and that will help us give us a starting point of where to begin. So it'll be an exciting project to work on. Before I go through this slide, I want to do one more kind of fun activity, which I don't have a slide on. And, I would like to announce who our student representative from Maricopa High School will be on the governing board to report to the governing board next year. And she just happens to be with us tonight. It is Sydney Akers, and she's sitting in the back. So please stand and be recognized, Sydney. And she was appointed by the student body leadership class, and we're looking forward to having her. She and I talked a little bit and decided that probably not necessary to have a report tonight, and she's going to take July off, June and July off, but she'll start coming back in August and giving us reports on what's going on at Maricopa High School. So we're looking forward to having Sydney on board, and thank you for doing it for us this year. And I know her mom Lisa's with us too, so thank you, Lisa, for doing it. On to more serious things. I feel an obligation to give you an update on our $1 million deficit reduction plan. As you know, it continues to evolve as we head towards the adoption of our final budget in July, at our July 10th meeting. So it is a work in progress. It changes a little bit each meeting as we continue to plan for next year. And just wanted to run through this real quickly. Some of it looks familiar. Of course, the top line, kindergarten, going from a full day to half with half-day tuition. That's our biggest savings, single savings of $480,000. The last time I showed you this slide, we projected that we would be reducing 1 elementary teacher next year, but as we continue to look at numbers and staffing for next year, we're not going to be able to do that. We have sufficient elementary enrollment that we're not only going to keep that teaching position in place, we'll actually be adding one, so I've added that down below. So I crossed it off, but that remind me to tell you about it, and I didn't include that $48,000 in the reduction category. Reductions at middle school are at $453,000. That's That figure has stayed pretty stable in recent reports. As you know, we're not replacing our MOL, Maricopa Online Administrator, but there's no savings there because that salary was paid with grant funds this year, and this reflects savings to our M&O budget, our operating budget. But that position will not be replaced. Next one is that we will not replace the Maricopa Online Counselor. That is an $80,000 savings with salary and benefits. We will not replace one Maricopa Online teaching position. That will save us $48,000. And the reason for that is that we're projecting, based on enrollment, that we will lose a number of students that were in the MOL program. We will lose about 50 students. And so there's only justification for one of the two teachers to move and roll over into Maricopa High School staffing plan. As you know, we're looking for a new online provider. That RFP will go out soon. We project that will save us $100,000. We should have savings in elementary principal salary. As you know, Dr. Flores is a veteran principal. He's at the top of the salary schedule, and we know that the principal that comes in won't be at that level. That'll save us at least $13,000. And then we have reduction in the district office staff, one clerical position of $26,000. So total reductions, $1,200,000. We do have some adds. This list is a little longer than last time. We'll be adding 1.5 ESS special ed teachers at the elementary level. We're adding beyond textbooks. That's on the agenda tonight. To approve that, we'll be paying, it's a total bill of $40,000. $10,000 will be paid for out of our professional development Title II grant. The remaining portion, $30,000, will be paid out of M&O. I think it's an excellent investment for our district. It's a K-12 curriculum tool that every teacher will benefit from, and I believe will impact every student. It's tied to Common Core. I think it is going to help us provide the enrichment activities we need for our accelerated students, as well as the reteach activities we need for our students needing remediation. And those are tools we need in our toolbox, and this is going to help us greatly. So that's on the list. Wasn't last time. We need to add one groundskeeper position. Our agreement with City of Maricopa will end. They've done a super job of maintaining our middle school fields, but they are building new fields. And so that I believe that agreement ends June 30th, I believe, is the date. And so with salary and benefits, we need to add a groundskeeper. And that'll help us all also. We need to, in addition to keeping the elementary teacher above, so it's kind of an awkward way to write it, but just trying to make the point, we'll be adding an elementary teacher also in addition to that for class size, based on enrollment and numbers today. And obviously, we're going to monitor this closely, and we may have to decide in a week, or well, probably not a week. Better answer would be the first week of school in August that we're going to add another teacher or two at the elementary level because of enrollment. But that is our plan as of today. And then the last one, we have to factor in the federal IDEA, that's the federal special ed funding, and that's being cut by 5% because of sequestration, which is a $35,000 cut, or really an added expense for us. So our bottom line grand total as of today is that we are at $975,000. So we're not over $1 million anymore, but we're close. We do think that our 301 allocation from the state for class size reduction, there's a portion of 301 funds that are for that purpose. We do anticipate that'll come in slightly higher. That will probably bump us over $1 million, as well as a couple other possibilities. The state's talking about a 1.8% increase in basic funding. So I think we'll be okay, but as of today, those are the numbers we're sure of, and that's where we're at.
Dr. Chestnut, you mentioned the recent projection of losing 50 online students. Mm-hmm. Is that taken in consideration in our in this pro forma, or does the $1 million deficit number need to increase as a result of a loss in revenue from enrollment?
Yeah, we've accounted for the staffing portion of it, and we'll have to crunch that number and get back to you on that. That'll be a project for our next meeting.
I have another question, Justin. On the, again, it's about the online provider, is that a conservative figure, that $100,000? Because I can remember some of those vouchers in the past, and that seems conservative.
Yes. Our purchase order with Greenways Academy for online services this year is for $240,000. So we think it'd be pretty easy to bring that into, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 140,000. I think it might be conservative. Aaron Roush thinks it might be aggressive, and so Aaron and I compromised on that number of $100,000. So that's the way I would answer that question.
It's a lot less than the vouchers, so I'm happy.
Yes, it would be nice if it could be a greater savings than 100,000. That would be the goal, of course. So we won't know until we get those RFPs back, and we can then decide. We're also looking at a couple options because when school districts offer a program, you can also enter an intergovernmental IGA, intergovernmental agreement, and we're looking at a few of those also, which would not require the RFP process, but we'll be bringing you some options or a recommendation to look at. That's it. We'll come back and talk about this later.
That's
all I
it.
have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chestnut. Brings us to our board member reports. I have a couple things. Does anybody want to go first?
I would just like to,
I knew it.
sorry. This is my favorite time of the year of being a board member because there are so many opportunities that we get to go out and celebrate our students' successes. And I'm just thrilled that I've been able to be a part of so many of them, and including the MEF teacher dinner, which was just one. The teachers give so much all year long, and I thought this was a wonderful way to celebrate and to congratulate them and thank them for everything that they do. So as a board member, this is my favorite part of being a board member.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to say one real quick recognition for Dr. Flores on a personal note. I know that he affected many students that have walked through the doors of his school, and I knew it the day my boys came home and said, you know what, I don't understand why Dr. Flores doesn't have a medical office. How come we still have a nurse and we have Dr. Flores? So once I explained to them that he was a doctor of education and how much schooling he had and what his specialty was, their next comment was, I want to be a doctor like Dr. Flores. So I want to thank him for influencing the many, many children that have walked through the doors of the district and Santa Cruz, but specifically my own boys, for encouraging them and be an example. Okay, that's it. Next, Mr. Bartle, anything? Okay. All right, information work study, that would be Dr. Chestnut.
As you know, we have taken this year to hear reports from each school on their math improvement plan. Each school is working pretty hard on that at the school site. Those plans tie in with our district learning improvement plan in the area of math. And normally we've just had one report each meeting, but we have two tonight, and we are starting with Santa Cruz Elementary. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Flores, principal from Santa Cruz.
Good evening, Dr. Chestnut and distinguished board members. Again, thank you for all the kind words you said about me today. I really appreciate it. And I know being a board member has got to be a tough time at times, right? And it's the pleasures that you had tonight. I know that it's all well worth it when you have those kind of events and opportunities to look at the best in those students that are doing well. So thank you for having me here. If you look at the screen there, I think you've got some handouts that we put in front of you. Santa Cruz math and some of the efforts that we've had there. The demographics show us that we have approximately 405 students, 170 Hispanic, 156 white, 42 black, 17 native, and 7 Asian. The improvement efforts in grades 1 through 5 were many. If you talk to teachers that teach math, and you ask them what they did, they'll tell us that they've exhausted every avenue they do each and every day in math. Some of the things that we had through the efforts of our district administrators was utilizing the learning from Math Solutions and Marilyn Burns. And this is a program, an initiative that allows the students to talk about what they do and to actually realize what they're doing and make that operational. Teacher research, because we do have a lot of teachers that go over and beyond what they learn in professional development, and they continue to do that. The weekly and daily collaboration in the school strategies they develop. Naturally, the parental support, because we do ask the parents to work with their children when they go home. And, of course, the effective teaching. A highlight on the bottom of this page is that the school success rate in meeting the required 3 points of growth in math was 86.04%, which was really, really good. Math grade 1 performance. The total of meets and exceeds went from 61.96% to 67.54%. Outstanding. Outstanding because at probably the last slide we'll show you that the mobility at probably all of our schools is pretty high. And so when teachers still influence and have the students go through the learning and captivate that learning, it's really outstanding. 39 students who met or exceeded increased to 41 students who met or exceeded. All of grade 1 gained 3 or more growth points and met the goal. 12 students exceeded on the pre-test and 32 students exceeded on the post-test. The math performance at grade 2, again, we look at the math performance, and here we took a dip from 68.96% in meets and exceeds to 49.54%. I went from 40 students meeting to 29 students meeting. Overall, all students at every grade level, however, made 3 growth points at every single grade level, except in one case by the final assessment, and each teacher, except for one, met the 301 plan growth in the math improvement requirement. The math performance in grades 3, 4, and 5. Grade 3 did an outstanding job, and this is just a highlight of it. But they grew from 61.01% to 78.57% in meets and exceeds. A phenomenal gain of 17.56%. And when you go into the classrooms, you would see them exhausting all avenues. The strategies weren't just one, it was everything that could possibly expose our students to. They went from 10 students exceeding on pre-test to 29 students exceeding on post-test. Again, this is very good, and the reason I say that is because in further slides I will talk about mobility rates. Grade 4 went from 63.71% to 51.33% in meets and exceeds. 8 students did not do as well in meets and exceeds performance category. Grade 5 went from 67.19% to 57.38% in meets and exceeds in the performance category, and that was a dip from 43 students to 39 students meeting and exceeding. Possible rationale. In other districts, I had done mobility studies, and it sort of tells you how the mobility is within schools, and I decided to go ahead and do that at Santa Cruz, because when I looked at the numbers, although we increased in growth points, it vacillated. But one example was that 72 students that enrolled at the beginning of Santa Cruz, the second semester, 2013, they had enrolled 72, and exactly 72 students withdrew during the second semester. So when you're looking at a school that has approximately 405 students, you have 72 students that left or came in and then left. The mobility rate of that is approximately 18% change if we just look at those prospective numbers within all the students. Or if you just look at those numbers, that's 100% mobility rate. That means of those students that came in, the match was at the same amount left. That's 100%. And so when you look at the sustainment of learning, the improvement of learning, one thing we have to do is that we have to develop strategies to persuade our families to remain at our schools for the entire year. And I'd venture to say that it happens probably in most of our schools. It was just mobility. Develop strategies that convince them, persuade them. You know, every time we'd have a family that was leaving, I would talk to the parents and ask them if there was anything we could do to help them. And a lot of times it was economics. A lot of times it was opportunities for jobs somewhere else. So somehow, someplace, as we exhaust all of the mindware that we have, we'd like to look at some possible solutions. The positives, every single teacher, students except one, made a minimum of 80% and up to 100% on 3 or more growth points in math. And that in itself is a great accomplishment. The teachers developed their 301 plan, they set those goals, and they made that 301 plan grow. Any questions? Dr. Chestnut, anyone? Thank you. Thank you for the kind words too, all of you. Thank you so much.
So we are ready for our second math report of the night, and Maricopa Wells is here, and they're ready to go. So we'll turn it over to Principal Rick Gable and his team.
We had too many presentations by Mr. Abel in the last couple of weeks. President Anderson, members of the board, Dr. Chestnut, I'm Rick Abel. I'm the principal at Maricopa Wells, and I'd like to introduce a few of our team members here today. We have Mr. Armin Zarifian, one of our 7th grade math teachers, Shannon Hall, one of our 8th grade math teachers, and Tina Bracken, who is our interventionist, academic coach, and all-around helper. We have a few changes on our slides, so I apologize for that, but we'll move quickly into the current data. And what we have here is our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade data. If you look closely, you see that this is all of our Galileo testing for the year. We do have our pre-test, benchmark 1, benchmark 2, and post-test. So they've been tested with the Galileo process 4 times this year in addition to their Ames testing. Pre-test was in August. First benchmark was in October, second benchmark in late January, and the post-test was held after Ames testing this year. Not the scores we want to see, but we do look at the data, we do study the data, and we use the data to improve instruction. A couple of positive things that we do see here. You'll notice that as the years go on, the kids who have been with us for 3 years are making more, over a period of 3 years, have made considerable growth. I think the longer the kids get to stay on our campus, the more beneficial it is for them. We do have some questions about this whole process. Sometimes the data just is overwhelming. You can't explain some things. I'd ask you to look at the 7th grade scores, and you'll see that from pre-test to post-test, it indicates that we lost nearly 20% of our kids meeting or exceeding. But in the same grade level, from benchmark 1 to benchmark 2, nearly 12 additional percentage, an increase on those 2 tests. Same kids, same testing program, and entirely different results. And we aren't sure how to explain those things. Sometimes they're outliers, sometimes it's the scheduling of the testing, but sometimes that makes it tough for us to use that information. The next couple of slides will be presented by Ms. Bracken, and she has some good news and some steps we've been taking. We'll change that too.
Yeah. The highlights are for 6th grade. We have 26% increase in Strand 5, which is about structure and logic. 7th grade improved 6 to 20% across all strands. And for 8th grade, we have 7% increase in number sense and 24% increase in proportional reasoning. And Ms. Bracken is going to continue our presentation.
Okay, so in looking at our scores throughout the year and our results, we tried to come up with some improvement efforts. So after the first semester was over, we looked at our more our more math classes and more is our intervention period, RTI. It's called all different things, CAT times, but here at Maricopa Wells it's called more. So we looked at all the students and we went with the Falls Far Below. We added 4 new sections for the second semester. So we had other teachers opening that up so that we are reaching more students. We based our more classes on what standards they were lacking in, and we developed through Galileo interventions and lessons and things like that. The math teachers were emailing and sharing their lesson plans so that consistency and that we were hitting the standards that we were supposed to hit. We do problem-solving benchmarks, and we blew up posters of the template. We blew up and changed around the rubric a little bit. We did some professional development as academic coaches to the staff on how to teach those better, how to incorporate the rubrics. The students reflected and got to actually do practice in their rooms with that weekly, so hoping that that would give us some growth in those problem-solving assessments. We also incorporated Algebra Ready into 8th grade math. We had me there this year, going around helping, doing observations, mentoring, again, giving those professional developments on the problem solving in different math. The teachers came up with a 7th hour, which was to help students that weren't doing their homework, weren't getting things completed in class. They reported to 7th hour, and that dramatically helped their grades along with the math. Before and after school tutoring, we have that before and after school program, and teachers also signed up and helped those students. A couple of teachers did parent math nights where they did a fraction night, and you could come and get extra help, and the parents could participate as well. So those were the efforts that we made to try to improve our scores.
Good evening. Some of our concerns that we've had, 6th grade, STRAM 1 represents 34% of the Ames blueprint, but only 25% were answered correctly, so that's a concern. With 7th grade, 13% questions answered correctly pertaining to conditional probability, so we need to concentrate on that more. And for 8th grade, 22% of questions pertaining to data and statistics, were answered correctly. And that represents 18% of the Ames blueprint, so we need to work on that in 8th grade as well. So we've identified these problem areas and know that we need to hit that a lot more next year, earlier and stronger, as well as making those, a lot of those can be done cross-curricular, social studies, looking at the data, science, things like that. So we need to work interdisciplinary measures to hopefully connect some of those strands and those topics that aren't quite connecting as well that we see right now. So we're going to work on that. Challenges that we see, right now we are teaching both the Common Core as well as the Ames standards. So we're trying to hit 2 things at once. We all are. We're getting through it, but that is a challenge for all of us. And we did have some reduced instruction time for math this year, so that was a bit of a struggle for us. So long-term projects, things like that, just kind of had to be put off to the side, which we don't like to do. We want to have those hands-on, real-world things, and we just didn't have time. So that is a challenge for us right now. Also, kind of to piggyback on what Dr. Flores says, the mobility rate in our schools is huge, and just keeping those students all year, it's a struggle. It's a struggle for all of us. So with getting our community more stable, I think it's going to help a lot with our school, as well as we are losing a lot of our teachers this year. We're having 2/3 of the kids, but only half of the staff members for math next year. So we're cutting down to 4 math teachers next year. So that's going to be tough. So that we see that as a challenge. We see that as something we're going to have to work through, the extra workload. And we're just going to have to really work a lot more as a team to make sure that we can come up with great solutions for our kids.
We did want to mention, again, the 20+1 efforts this year. Again, number of awards from the Future Cities program, and also the program was very successful to the extent that we're going to be able to expand it to a total of 100 students this next year, and there will be a program located on each of the 2 middle school campuses We're very excited about that. They've done a great job. Conclusion-wise, we're looking forward to seeing the AIM scores. We think they'll be the best indicators of our progress, and we expect to see excellent growth in our students. Those will be here in just a couple of weeks. We're looking forward to it. We are also looking forward to planning for next year and continuing the improvement at Maricopa Wells. So if you have questions, we try and address those.
I do have one question. Regarding the tutoring, the before and after school tutoring, what about the kids? Are they participating?
This is one of our 21st century programs, before and after school. Limited number of kids enrolled this year. Morning-wise, Mr. Zeriffian?
We have more students in the afternoons rather than in the mornings. But we have to have 120 students participating to the program, which we do.
Okay.
And again, we had a large number of kids involved in that 7th period after school as well. Other questions?
Mr. Abel, you mentioned, and maybe this might be more directed at Dr. Chestnut, but you had mentioned that maybe timing is an issue with when the pre and post tests are given. So bigger question is, I guess, for Dr. Chestnut and Dr. Connolly for future information, do all of our schools pre and post math at the same time? And they don't. We don't know.
No, elementary does it a week or so before or after us.
Okay.
After middle school, I should say.
So then the question is, do we need to look at that? And maybe timing is there something else going on in life that these need to be scheduled at different times? Because I'm seeing a trend in, as we've seen the math presentations, that some of them are high, some of them are even, quite a few of them are even or a little bit below.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if that is a timing issue or if there's some other things going on. So I guess that's just a future question.
I would say that both the middle schools, we've noticed that in the past we've taken the post test before we took our Ames test, or we took a benchmark 3 before our Ames test. And those scores have generally been 5 to 8% higher than the Ames scores. We think there's a little test fatigue, so this year we tested the Ames test first and then followed a week later with these post tests. So I'm sure kids are a little bit worn out from the testing process. And again, we think that'll be shown in our Ames scores, more improvement there and more accurate as well.
And unfortunately, this year for the 7th and 8th grade post-test, there was a printing issue. So we had started our testing at Wells.
Tia, will you please speak in the mic for the, thank you.
We had started our testing at Wells. Our schedule was before Desert Winds, so they were able to fix their issue. But we had passed out our tests and gone through, and it's really embarrassing, but it was the wrong test. It was the test from the time before. So those kids had started. We had to stop them, collect them all, scramble. So those math tests, I mean, who knows, they could have been timed out there too. Now I have to go and they had to make it all up, and so that could have affected some of our post-test scores for 7th and 8th grade.
So elementary takes the pre and post all together, and secondary takes the pre and post all together?
Middle schools take it
Middle
all.
schools.
Middle school, and then high school does it a different schedule?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
We've heard, Dr. Chestnut, we've heard about the mobility issue a couple times tonight as it relates to low scores. And if Dr. Flores' analysis is correct, there's not a lot we can do about mobility. Certainly the things that we can impact that, we want to. But if it's a matter of economics and people getting jobs out of town and so forth. And we as individual schools and as our district, we're not graded on a curve, right? The state doesn't care about our mobility rate. Parents don't care about our mobility rate. We just got to figure this out. High mobility, no mobility.
Just to address that quickly, we do have information this year that indicates we're becoming a little more stable. At Maricopa Wells, we have about 725 kids on campus right now. In addition to our new 6th graders, we had 200 new enrollments from outside the district, either to begin the school year or during the course of the school year. And of those 200 students, 179 or 180 are still with us today. So 90% of those kids have stayed. We've lost some other kids along the way, but our enrollment's gone up by about 60 students during the course of the year. And I hope that's a trend that we'll see continue next year.
And if, pardon me, if high mobility is perpetually going to be a way of life here in Maricopa, then let's do everything we can to address that as far as transitioning kids and families, of course.
I think that's an important point. So, the main way that we've been working on to attack that issue is to provide the remediation kids need. So, double dosing math at the high school level or middle school level, a remediation strategy at the elementary level. That's one. Beyond textbooks, for example, we'll have more reteach materials for teachers at all levels. So, there's a variety of things, but really all has to do with that remedial help, second dose that kids need to get them caught up, whether they've been with us, for a couple of years or whether they just move in at mid-year. And we should be able to know what their level is and then assist them with the gaps that they have.
Thank you, Mr. Abel. It's your turn. Dr. Connolly.
Good evening. President Anderson, Vice President Couture, members of the board, Dr. Chestnut. I will be, I'm going to do the same as Dr. Chestnut. I'm going to go ahead and fill some airspace until the PowerPoint gets ready. Tonight, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of where we've been and where we're going for next year with curriculum, instruction, assessment, and professional development. And he's telling me he doesn't have my PowerPoint. So
I have it.
time out. Let me resend it to him really quickly.
Do we want to skip and go to the charter school, or would that mess his presentation up? You want to skip over?
Consent and stuff, we can come back
No,
to
I
it.
mean, well, I was just saying, because we still have the charter school option slide. Can we do that? And then that way, Dr. Connolly, you can get your slides?
Send it right now. Depends on how fast our internet depends on feels like working tonight, but that is up to you, President.
It's simple.
It's up to you, Dr. Chestnut.
I'm ready to go.
Use
My
some
slide
space.
got there first.
Okay.
Well, as you know, we have been talking about charter school options the last few meetings, and something I think we need to consider as a school district. And we've been talking about pros and cons, and I went through this slide last time. I did add some new information, and I put it in all cap letters there. And we talked at our last meeting about the fact that charters can give us more flexibility. One example I had from our last meeting was the possibility of a 200-day school year, because individual charter schools could have a 200-day school year. They would receive 5% in additional funding from the state of Arizona to make that happen. It would be 20 more school days. But there's a long list of stuff we can put up here, but magnet programs are another way to talk about the flexibility that charters have. Distinctive programs, so there could be a variety of ways you talk about that, but a magnet school, in fact, all of these things listed here would be examples of what a magnet program could be. You could have a blended learning emphasis at your school, where you are going to make that an emphasis at each grade level. Looks like our 20+1 program. You could have a STEM elementary school or a STEM middle school, and STEM is the acronym for science, technology, engineering, and math. That could be your emphasis. You could have a traditional curriculum. A core knowledge curriculum is one of the commercial programs that's out there, very popular in many charter schools. You could have a Spanish immersion, got an extra S on there, but you could have, well, any language. Obviously, if you could find staff that could teach that, but you could have some kind of a foreign language emphasis. It could be a performing arts emphasis. Magnet is a term that's kind of been thrown around for a number of years. That really just talks about programs of distinction at a school, and that is something we can do without creating charters, but it's something we haven't gone down that road as a district, and we may decide to. I mean, maybe the board governing board says, we're not going to go with charters, but we're going to work on developing magnet programs. And the closest we come to that is our blended learning program for grades 7 and 8 next year. And that's been popular. That's an example of a magnet. But just that whole flexibility idea, you know, our approach to elementary schools has been that they're pretty much the same, all 6 of them. And, you know, that's something that maybe a charter would give us the opportunity to make them different from one another. Then going down to the bottom, I think there is the possibility of greater parental involvement. That can be written into the charter. You could ask parents to do more volunteering at the school if their son or daughter attends that school. That's a possibility that could be written in. And then another pro on this whole issue is that I received feedback from 5 schools. I asked all 9 schools to have a meeting with parents the last week, but last 2 weeks of school, it's not the best time to have a parent meeting, and so I don't think they got it all done. But 5 schools did. The feedback was positive. There were no comments like, this is a bad idea, we shouldn't even consider it. There were a lot of questions that do need to be answered, but I thought good questions. Kind of along the lines of, this sounds interesting, can you answer this question about it? And so in some cases I've sent those answers to the principals, and we'll keep answering those questions as we get further down the road, but I was pretty pleased with that. I thought it was positive feedback from parents. And then, we also talked about cons, and probably you've seen that slide last time, but the letter E there, Arizona legislature is considering a moratorium on school district charters retroactive to April 30th of this year. That bill has not been passed, it's been introduced, it's I think part of the final budget discussions for K-12 funding. Last I heard, it has been removed from the funding proposal, but it could certainly resurrect itself before the end of the term. But at the same time, there'd be no harm in pursuing this because we, as of today, it's still permissible. So a little funding comparison, traditional versus charter schools. Aaron Roush crunched some numbers for me, and I shared some of this information with you on email. This is updated a little bit, and the way that it's updated is in desegregation funds. Currently, we receive funding. I think there's a number of districts in the state of Arizona that received desegregation funds as a result of a federal court order. That amounts to about $217 a student, which means that our funding, our base funding from the state of Arizona is $4,274 per student, including our desegregation funding. I put a little star by there because I haven't got to the bottom of this. I have one opinion that charters can include the desegregation funds and one opinion that they can't. So I'm going with the conservative idea up here that may not be included in charter funding. So you can see that I did not include it in the charter category there in the middle. And so you can see the difference between the two is bottom right-hand corner, $1,164 between charter school funding, which really kicks in year 2, not in year 1. $1,164 additional per student for charters. So if you look at on a school basis with these updated numbers, an elementary school of 750 students, Butterfield will be about 800 next year. We're going to have large elementaries. Maricopa Elementary School will be somewhere around 750. Those will be the 2 largest, but if one of those, for example, was a charter school, that would generate $873,000 in additional funding from the state. Middle schools will be smaller next year. There'll be about 450 students because they'll only have 2 grades each. But if one of those middle schools was a charter, it would generate about $524,000 in additional funding. And I think that's all I have for slides. We've got to take any questions.
Mr. Brown? Oh, I thought you were going to say something. Excuse me. So if this is implemented, if we apply for it and receive it this summer, because the deadline is June, is that what you said it was?
June 30th.
Okay, June 30th. So the kindergarten, we would get the funds, the extra funds for the kindergarten only, for that whatever the school is, if it's an elementary school. And then we'd still get the ADE funds for 1st through 6th grade, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so then the following year, we would get the charter funds for all the students, so it kicks in the second year.
Correct.
So what are the possibilities? I mean, it's pretty hard at this point to create a focused charter school, because that's how I see a charter school, and maybe that's, I've just got tunnel vision, that it's got something that makes it special, that makes it different from the other charters in the area, or even in the state. So is there a goal or a plan for next year, for 2014-15, that this would be a focus school, or would we open up another elementary? I mean, I guess the possibilities are endless,
Yes.
but
Right.
is there a plan for a focus?
Yes, there would definitely be a plan. And I think we talked about this a little bit last time. We have a timing problem because we have to make this decision by our second meeting in June, which is June 24th, somewhere in there. I forget the exact date. It's coming right up, and so if we decided to have one charter school or more, the charter and the resolution by the governing board would have to be delivered by June 30th to the state board. That's doable, but the part that would be difficult would be to spend a lot of staff time to come up with the program of distinction for each school. So we would make that priority one for, let's say we took one elementary school and made it a charter for next year. That would really be their first task next year as a faculty, principal, parent team to come up with a program of distinction for that school. What will that school emphasize, and what will that charter, what will that magnet program be for that charter? So we'd want to get that done in the first 4 or 5 months, because then you'd want to like market that for 4 or 5 months so that parents could make informed choices for the following school year. So it would still be a neighborhood school, even in year 2, but we'd have a more defined approach. And I think that's the way it would work.
So even, what if a parent chose not to send them to that
Neighborhood school.
neighborhood school because of whatever the philosophy is? So do we need to change boundaries? I mean, because it's not a public school, so it's not, I mean, I guess I'm having an issue with, we're a public education.
Traditional public.
And I understand, I also know that we need to offer options.
It gets a little confusing.
Okay.
If we create a charter school, it will still be very much public school, publicly funded, and we'll take all comers at that school. My advice would be that we don't make boundary changes. Maybe that's something we'll decide we have to do in year 2 or 3 as we see some issues. But just in researching Cave Creek School District, this is their first year with charter schools, and they took all elementary schools except one and made it a charter school. They did not change boundaries. They continued to be neighborhood schools. They kept their same enrollment policies so that the service area for each elementary school, that was the priority registration for that school. And but they still continued with their open enrollment policy, just like ours. So currently, all of our schools are open enrollment, and parents have choices now. And so I think that would continue. The choices might just be a little bit more unique in the future as we develop our charter.
Dr. Chestnut, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No.
In order to change one of our public schools and make them a charter school, do we have to change something about it? Do we have to change the number of days of curriculum? Do we have to, in order to make it a charter in their resolution, what do we have to do that's different from how we have our schools now?
Nothing, really. We do have to have the board approve a resolution saying we're going to make this school or these 2 schools or 3 or whatever it is charters, and then there has to be a charter document for each school that is on that resolution. I was reviewing the charter today from Cape Creek Elementaries, and those charters are very general. And yet I know that at Cape Creek they have done a nice job of creating magnet programs at each elementary. They did not, for whatever reason, choose to even mention that in the charter. But if you go to their school district websites or their school websites, you will find their programs of distinction for each school. They have I believe they have a performing arts school. I believe they have a Spanish immersion school. They have a couple different magnet type programs. The actual formal documents, the one that I reviewed, did not mention that.
Okay.
I like options.
I do have a question regarding the program of distinction. What will this be based on? So if the parents and the teachers decide that they want Spanish immersion, what is that based on? How do we come up with a program of distinction?
That's a good question. We come up with a process that we'd ask each school to go through with a timeline and questions we'd want asked, and a certain number of meetings to discuss that kind of thing. But I think the bottom line is that the magnet that each school chose to create would be based around, I think, the strengths of their staff and the desires of the parents. I think you can't create a school like that without input from parents. And I think it would have to be something that would fly with the parents that really are going to be sending their kids there. So I think it would be an interesting discussion to have, and I think it would be a good discussion to have. But it had to be something that we could afford. You couldn't choose a curriculum that is out of our budget, and that we could staff appropriately.
So on the funding, the extra money that's accountable for the charter over above ADE, does that money needs to be allocated just to that charter school, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
That's where I understand it.
So budget-wise, do we have to approve two budgets, one for the MUSD traditional public schools and then one for the charter school?
As I understand the Cave Creek process, they're kind of the poster child for this. They do not. No, they use their standard policies, and they adopt one budget. I'm guessing there's probably some more detail in that budget document that isn't there currently by individual school, but as I understand it, they still adopt one budget.
Okay.
And can we clarify for the next meeting, it's probably a Mr. Roush question, if obviously 15 years is a long time, I don't know who the board will be at that point. The district has to, if the board decides to convert it back, the district is responsible for retroactive funds. So all those funds that we received extra for the charter, the district would need to pay back to the state. Can we just clarify that? Because that's kind of a scary thought if at any point, I think the school district needs to just plan accordingly that people come and go, and just needs to be clarified.
That should be pretty easy to figure out. I mean, you saw the figures per school per year. So we multiply that times 15, put a little inflation factor in there, and that would be the total. But we can certainly get that number, an estimate anyway.
Okay. Or even just per year. I mean, that's kind of a scary thought, but I want to go into whatever we decide with all the facts.
I'm hearing conflicting reports on that, and that is it at any time in perpetuity, or is it only if we break that commitment in the 15-year period that we?
Only if you break it in the 15-year period.
Okay.
Right.
So if 15 years from now, we would not be obligated to repay?
Correct.
Okay.
But up to that, I mean,
Right.
10 years, if we break that agreement before 15 years, we're responsible for everything for the last 10 years or whatever it is you're breaking that commitment. I guess that's what I need clarification on.
Oh, that's correct. I mean, that part's pretty clear. I just, we could crunch the number and.
It's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's risk reward, right? Think about what would prompt us to need to do that, and it would probably be the need for a significant amount of capital infusion from the school facilities board, which makes us really unique is that, well, A, there's no money in the school facilities board, so that's for the foreseeable future not even an issue, but B, our facilities are new enough where we likely would not run into that predicament, but I'm sure our facilities experts could give us more specifics on that next meeting.
And just, we don't know what's going to happen 15 years from now, but what would happen if they had to close the charter? Would that, not change it back, but actually just have to close the school? Do you have to pay the funds back then?
I don't know. We could check on that.
I know these are all what-ifs. It's just I would like to have all the information before that decision is made. I mean,
Dr. Cheston, I have one more question. In your recommendation, will it be one elementary and one middle school?
Well, I haven't made a recommendation yet.
No, whenever you make the recommendation, or whatever we're doing in June. We have to vote in June, right, on the 30th?
Right. My plan would be to bring a recommendation at the June board meeting. And the board obviously will have a range of options. So we could go anywhere from 1 to 5 elementary schools, because we have to have one that remains a traditional public school offering. We could do 1 to 5 elementaries, and we could do 1 middle school only, because we have to have one as a traditional middle school, and then we can't consider the high school
It's only one.
because it's the only one.
But if we do one this year, we could do another one essentially if the legislation doesn't change. My concern is I don't want to rush into something and then run into the issues we've had with past programs. So I would like, my thought is to proceed with caution, do one, see how it works, do another, and I mean, I just, that's just my own thought. Do it and get it right. Do it right the first time.
I understand that rationale, and it makes sense. The one issue is that this opportunity may end. And it could end in this legislative session, and it could end in the next legislative session, and we don't know how long the window's going to be open.
So Dr. Chestnut, we look forward to reading and hearing about your recommendation, and I suggest we have a resolution drafted that we could vote on as well, and given that we only have 2 meetings left before the end of the period.
At least bring us the information with the questions. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right, Dr. Connolly?
Okay, let's try it again. It's so exciting that it needs to have a drum roll.
We can approve our consent agenda. That'll take like 30 seconds. Can we jump over it
Whatever
like
you
that?
need to do.
Okay. You know what, let's jump over that and go to our item 6, which is the consent agenda. And remember, A and B have been taken out. So do we have any motions for that one?
Actually, I think it was A and C that was removed, correct?
No, it's A and
B.
A and B.
Okay, I'll go down A and C.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And we're up.
Okay.
Here we go. Curriculum, we are, as you've heard, moving into our Common Core state standards for Arizona, providing professional development, of course, this last year, for the last 2 years, and into this next year to be fully implemented by the end of this year. Moving into Beyond Textbooks, which is a Common Core state standard, for no better word, a warehouse of resources to support the curriculum standards. And last but not least, the Understanding by Design. We have done all of our reading and math and our science standards from the national state Common Core state standards has been released, and so science is now on schedule. Instruction, we did complete this last year, the classroom that works with all of our staff, and I believe out of all of our staff, we had one person that was unable to complete it, and the only reason that one person did not complete it is they had done it in their master's program, and it was much more in-depth and extensive than what we offered, so we waived that. 99.9% of our staff completed classroom instruction that works. The next part of that is the art and science of teaching. So we are continuing with that, and then of course going back with our new staff and filling it with classroom instruction that works. We have Socratic seminars again on schedule for this next year to engage students in that deep critical thinking and some dialogue and a dialogue protocol to follow. And following our state evaluation using promising practices and the Charlotte Danielson evaluation framework to increase professional practice. Assessment, We are moving into PARC, which is your Common Core State Standard Assessments, moving from Ames into PARC. We have one more year with Ames, and then we're going fully online, which means that we internally are looking at the infrastructure and our needs for computer and internet wireless access to be able to provide that assessment. We've seen glimpses of PARC on our state website. There are released items of what this looks like, but again, this is very new to all of us in education, so we are anxiously awaiting how that will change. And as you've heard, the Galileo, this was the first year that we have fully engaged in a pre and post test, and that is to measure instructor effectiveness, which is part of the state legislation moving into our performance evaluation with the state, with at least 33% of a teacher's observation and evaluation and principles to be based on data. So I have to give kudos to Rick Nielsen and the amount of work that he's had to do with pulling all the data together, analyzing that data, and then providing some readable reports, not only for us at district, for principals, but individual teacher level data of how many students have met, exceeded, and also met their required growth. Professional development, we are looking at more effective ways to provide professional development that is tailored to specific sites. We are looking into what's called PD in Focus. It is a web-based professional development site that principals can basically elect courses, and it allows some online journaling among staff. It really frees up the flexibility and to delve into their site-specific areas. It is completely aligned with all of our practices that we've started with our district improvement plan. So it would be a very cost-effective and more flexible, responsive way to meet the needs of our teachers. We are looking at more site-based Wednesday professional learning communities at all of our schools, including the high school, because we know at our secondary schools that we need to be able to provide them that collaboration, teamwork, data-driven dialogue to really be able to move to that next level. Culture, we know that within looking at our demographics in Maricopa and the change that we've had in staff turnover, that we need to do a better job in providing some culture professional development. We're really excited about Love and Logic for our parent universities. For the next 3 years, we have a transition program going into Love and Logic for parents. We're starting this year for preschool through second grade parents specifically. Then we're expanding into all the way to elementary and then into secondary. So we have a very concrete written implementation plan for that. And we, as you know, we applied through the Arizona K-12 Center. We had, Dr. Chestnut, I hope you can remember, I believe 13 teachers that applied for the master teachers and went through the application process. And it was vigorous, like the national certification is, but not as a long process. And all of our teachers made it into that. Maricopa has now been, we are now on the map with the Arizona K-12 Center, really looking at, in their words, the up and coming stars, which made us really look into the mentoring grant, which is a $100,000 grant for our new teachers to be mentored by the master teachers.
I have one question.
questions?
Regarding the Ames versus the park, what's the explanation for the change?
The explanation for the change?
Yeah, since
Moving
we're-
from state standards to the Arizona Common Core national standards. And it is a totally, I'm not gonna say totally different, but the standards go much deeper into the concepts
park?
rather than just going wide.
Broad.
And have we received any other information on funding for the park? Because I know the legislation has, they were talking about not funding it and that we would have to do Ames even longer. Is there any more updated information on that, or are we still just waiting for them to approve the education budget?
We're looking at, I mean, of course, they're looking at the education budget, but I can tell you from a federal point of view, they have started releasing many more grant opportunities for technology and innovations in education. which we did apply for, and our application is now in process, which is, the pre-application was huge to even get to the application process, and so we're there now. And we've seen, like I said, an increase in support for technology.
For the park? Because I know it's all
Going to have to be
technology-based.
completely, yes, it's going to have to be embedded. It's not, of course, a standalone. Our students have to be able to not only take the assessment, be able to use it effectively in technology. But I will tell you too, at the state level, they're getting to completely understand that so many of the districts, even with our new facilities, we don't have the infrastructure ready to go.
Okay. That's it. Any other questions for Dr. Connolly?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Chestnut, Dr. Connolly. That brings us to, from the consent agenda, item 6A, which is now in area 7. And Mr. Bartle, you had a question for A and B.
Not a question so much as an
Oh.
apology,
Oh.
but I typically save the fun of reviewing the vouchers till the end when I'm preparing for board meetings, and life happened and I forgot to go back and review those in any detail, so I'm going to abstain from this vote and the next one.
Oh, for 7A and, well, 7B,
6A and
6A,
6A and
6B. Okay. So for 6A, is there any questions or motions, discussion on that? I mean, I looked over it and
I did, yeah.
it was,
I'll move to approve.
I second that.
all right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And one abstention, so it was 3-1. All right, so, 6B, which is ratifying the payroll voucher. Is there
We
any
could
motion?
really set some people off. That's fine. I move to approve.
And I'll second that one. So we do have a motion, and there is a second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
So, and one abstention. All right. Moving on. We are to 7A, which is the HR schedule. And I need to really quick, I forgot to mention that Mrs. Burnett has an excused absence, and I apologize. So Leslie, I'm sorry. But that's why she's not here. Sorry. All right, go ahead, Mr. Beckett.
Thank you, President Anderson, members of the Governing Board, Dr. Chestnut. You have in front of you our personnel schedule for tonight, and I'll entertain any of your questions at this point.
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say thank you for getting all these done sooner than, it's nice to see everything
You're welcome.
front-loading, so I thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have all of our teachers in place at this point?
No, we don't. Member Couture, we actually, our contracts were delivered on the 9th. That was be the Thursday after our last board meeting, after you ratified those names. Contracts are due back on the 30th from all of our teachers.
On the 30th?
So-
Okay.
We have some time. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Beckett? Any motions, any further discussion?
I move to approve the HR schedule.
I
We have
second that.
motion and a second. All right, any last discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Beckett.
Thank you.
See where that is.
7B takes us to our public meeting for comments on the closing of Maricopa Online, beginning with the 2013-2014 school year. I did not receive any comment cards. I don't know if there's anybody that walked in late for a public comment on the Maricopa Online closing. Okay, we will move on to C, which is discussion and possible approval of closure of Maricopa Online beginning with the school year 2013-14. Discussion, questions? Go for it.
Dr. Chestnut, with the closure of this, is that when we can start moving forward for another provider for the online programs?
Well, they're not dependent on one another, but we are, you approved the RFP process, and so
Okay.
we're just putting the finishing touches on that. We'll send that out, and like I mentioned, we'll be reviewing IGA possibilities also, which may mean we we like one of those and think that's the best deal, that may be where we end up. But
Okay,
that's the next step, but it is independent of this decision.
okay.
So can I clarify, I know we talked about this at the last meeting. Online classes will still be available. They'll just be enrolled in the Maricopa High School
Yes.
instead of a Maricopa Online. So even those 50 students that you said we were going to lose, they'll be enrolled, hopefully, at the high school to take the online classes.
Right. Worst case scenario would be we'd lose 50 students. We are also hoping to add soon, maybe as soon as the next board meeting, sometime this summer, no dropouts option,
Right.
which is interesting because it's almost identical to the Maricopa Online program. The difference is you are issued a laptop and you do it strictly from your home. You meet once a week with a counselor. So we think that that will be attractive to some of those students that have been in the Maricopa Online program. We're hoping to have that in place, but it's not there yet. So that's one way we will pick up students. And but as you stated, credit retrieval will still be available online for students that are behind on credits. So if you're moving from Maricopa Online to Maricopa High School, you'll have an opportunity to get caught up, just like you currently do. And then the other way that we use our online coursework is to have credit enrichment.
Right.
Maybe some elective that we don't offer that one of our advanced students wants to take. It's not a lot of students that do that, but some, that'll be an option as well.
Okay, so it's still being offered, just not the same expense. Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Chestnut or comments? All right, any motions on the closure of Maricopa Online?
I move to approve the closure of Maricopa Online.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any last minute discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Maricopa Online will be closed for the 2013-2014 school year. Discussion and possible approval of the first reading of the revision to policy G3750, GCG, part-time and substitute professional employment. Mr. Beckett.
Thank you, President Anderson, members of the Governing Board, Dr. Chestnut. You have in front of you tonight a recommendation for some elimination of some of the language that was in the substitute teacher portion of that policy. This portion of the policy actually is contradictory to our practice. And so we're simply aligning our policy with our practice. And again, that is a typical phrase, that first sentence is a typical phrase you see in most school districts' policies in regards to substitute rates.
Just for the record, we typically prefer to align our practices with our policies,
That is correct.
but I don't disagree with the change.
So we haven't been following this, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Motions?
I move to approve.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The first reading of policy G3750 GCG of the employment is approved.
Thank you.
Discussion and possible approval of resolutions to be submitted to the Arizona School Board Association. Is there any discussion?
No.
Comments?
I'll
Go
make-
ahead.
Because of the changes that are being made for this whole process through ASBA, I, at this point, really don't feel that, unless someone has come up with something significant that can really tie into legislation, that at this time, we need to submit something. I know in the past, we have tried to submit resolutions for the legislation committee regarding the busing, and we tried to word it in a different way instead of telling them not to come into our district. But my experience has been in the legislative committees and the delegate assemblies that I've been attending, that's not supported. ASBA doesn't support it. The majority of the school districts don't support it. And I think we would be better served if we found something that either was supported by legislation, maybe we contact our representatives and see if they want to put something behind it. But we need to advocate for our students stuff that can really happen. Even though we put something to ASBA, that doesn't mean it's going to happen. So I think we would be better served, in our district, we'd be better served if we looked for those other opportunities and take this next year and do that.
I would agree with that. Well said. My concern is serving on, now that I'm on the legislative committee and have seen this process for the last few years, it's a very long process. And really, we would need to get one of our representatives to sponsor a House bill. And that would be my focus, is that we meet with our representatives and ask them, what can you do to help us, and see if we can have common ground. Also, in talking to the other school districts and being able to share information, it's also helpful to have a team of school districts who are going to support that and have a common goal. So, for instance, Pinell County, that's the one thing I've been asking school districts when I go out to them, what is it that, is there some common ground that we can all focus on, because you really need a large group to make any of these changes happen. I personally would like to see us focusing on, if we do, focusing on something that's going to get our schools to be A schools. What's really going to help our students? Maybe it's the funding issue. Maybe it's the education formula issue. It's a bigger issue. And my recommendation would be to wait until we go through this legislative process, see what the House bills are, see what we can get behind us and advocate that way. And it being on the legislative committee, it's just, at this point, we don't even know what the House bills are going to be. So that would be that's my comment.
President Anderson, would you mind if, for the benefit of the public and as a refresher, that if I read what we proposed a year ago?
You can read it. I don't agree with it, but you can certainly read it.
Thank you. What we submitted to the Arizona School Board Association last year was this. The action we recommended was support legislation that eliminates providing taxpayer-funded transportation to students voluntarily attending a school other than their home public school district. The rationale is that the limited funding for K-12 education should be directed to classrooms and teachers whenever possible. If students and parents choose to take advantage of open enrollment and attend a school outside their district, they should be obligated to pay for transportation themselves. The financial burden should not be placed on the schools, students, parents, and taxpayers. Arizona's obligation is to educate our children. It is not to transport our children to and from the school of their choice. Those precious funds should be spent in Arizona's classrooms and on Arizona's teachers, with priority given to improve the schools from which students seek open enrollment. This was passed unanimously 5-0. My recommendation is that in lieu of just not submitting anything to ASBA and knowing full well that they are going to deny support of our request, I'd certainly open your feedback of why this year you don't agree with such an initiative, but I don't think that we ought to throw in the towel and let them off that easy. I think we ought to make them say no again. This is important to our school district. We ought to fight for it.
Well, to answer that, having been part of the delegate assembly and going to the floor for the last 2 years, I would invite you to probably be part of that process so that you can understand going to the floor and making a statement doesn't necessarily make us look any better. Several things have changed in the last year. I think that we were very naive when that was constructed last year. I think there are several pieces in there. It's like 3 things in one time if it were going to be separated. There's a funding issue, and there's a transportation issue, and I think that those two things need to be separate. That's why I'm not supporting the way it's written this year.
Explain to me, if you will, the separation of the transportation and the funding.
You've got, there's a funding issue as far as the education formula. That's the issue that we're looking at, not just the transportation. If you're gonna look at transportation, then look at maybe the miles or a specific transportation issue, but it's two separate issues.
Well, I guess the action that we had supported was transportation-oriented. The rationale, of course, is funding-related because of Arizona taxpayers spending their money on transportation limits the amount of funds that we can put in the classroom.
As Member Coutre stated earlier, I think that it would be helpful if we take this time to look at it, meet with a representative, and have them sponsor a House bill that would focus on what it is you want them to focus on.
And we are going down that path. This is not an end-all be-all by any means, and I have no expectation that this will yield any positive results. But nonetheless, I think it's incumbent upon us and our responsibility to continue to push forward and at every angle and every direction with every association that we can.
I agree we need to support our students' education, but my way to take it would be do it at a legislative end and not try to butt heads with everybody else. So that's would be my recommendation, is that there's another way to do it besides having Patty go to the delegate floor and read the statement.
And get zero support.
It's an important issue to our district. Isn't that
It
the
is
point
important.
of the process?
It
There's
is
another
important.
way to do it. There's another way. I think that we need, like I say, I recommend we meet with our representatives for Pinal County and see if somebody can help us construct a House bill that will support public education.
Which we are doing, but they're not going to come to the Arizona School Board Association delegate meeting on our behalf, right? That's not the goal. If we can chip away, and maybe it takes 10 years, and maybe if we're doing it, and the other handful, the minority of school districts that are negatively impacted by this and do see value in this, if we continue the process and we continue to chip away, well, guess what? In time, maybe that has an impact. And if the alternative is we just don't want to, I don't know how we'd be butting heads, but it's okay to be a squeaky wheel, I think, if there's something that we believe in and it's something that has an impact on our district. So.
Okay, so are there any motions for any resolutions?
I make a motion that we submit to the Arizona School Board Association the same request that we submitted last year.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? Okay, there's no second. Motion fails. Is there any other? I think that that's a good start, and we can continue to work on it. But I think we need to work on it much more. So that would be. Are there any other resolutions for ASBA at this point?
So no voice.
All right, going forward to 7F, discussion and possible approval of outside eating area located at the high school.
Aaron Roush has been doing the work on this. I'll turn it over to him.
Okay.
You can introduce Don and take it from there.
President Anderson, members of the board, Dr. Chestnut, it's exciting to bring back to you the high school outside eating area. If you remember, we had a number of projects that were approved, and we're pretty well finished with those projects. And one of the recommendations from the administration, it was the outside eating area because of how it affected our students at the high school and limiting the number of students that we can have inside, and which limits the number of lunches that we have, which limits greatly the scheduling of the high school. So it creates non-flexibility by doing this, and it creates a non-comfortable eating environment for our students. So Don and I have been working towards this, and with about a $510,000 budget, we've been working with one of the approved job order contractors, McCarthy, who pretty much did all the work at the high school. And with that, there's approximately $420,000 of hard construction costs. In this, we have about $45,000 of architectural engineering and other permitting, surveying costs, and about another $45,000 of contingency, which is kind of a bid contingency, because when you do job order contracting, you get 3 bids, and so you have a bid contingency, and then we'll have within that a minor construction contingency, because most of the project costs, once it gets out of the ground, I think it'll be pretty standard. So it's exciting. I know June Salaya shared a lot of that information with the staff, and I think they're potentially excited about it. There are some students that are too. In Arizona, it's great to take advantage of the space that you can to eat outside when it is comfortable, and then when it's not, you do have to have some type of a shaded environment. So with that, I'm going to introduce Don, and he has some sketches and modeling that he can talk about and answer any questions.
Well, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Chestnut, with not to sound mushy, but gee, I missed you guys. It has always been a privilege to work for the Maricopa Unified School District. And 2 personal notes: it was nice to be here when you recognized Dr. Flores tonight, because I had the privilege of being able to work here with the district when he was a superintendent. A lot of great things. Second personal note: I haven't seen Mr. Beckett in a while, and I ran into him last week, and I said, "Gee, Tom, you let your hair grow out a little bit. I wish I could do that." So I was envious, so that. So anyway, matter at hand. I was approached to take a look at an obvious issue that Mr. Rouse brought up about the eating situation. You have an existing cafeteria area that roughly seats about 300 people, 300 students, and when you have the amount of students on this campus and the possible growth that you might have on that campus, right now they're running 4 periods for the lunch hour. It is very hectic. It is not desirable. And so they asked me to take a look at, is there a possibility of adding some exterior covered outdoor dining that we could increase the capacity and decrease the number of lunch periods, preferably down to 2. Right now they're feeding about 1,200, as I was told, so you're talking about 300 inside. It's not really desirable outside to eat, so that's where the 4 lunch periods came from. We can actually increase the number, or increase the area for students to dine outside, and to be able to even go up to about 1,800 students. We'd have 300 inside, you'd have roughly about 600 outside. Obviously, some days might not be as desirable, but at least it would give them the opportunity to reduce the number of lunch periods, and that was really the #1 priority. Can you give us some outdoor dining so we can reduce those lunch periods? The second priority, and who has the, Dr. Chestnut, you have a clip? Is there a little pointer on this? Jack, I'm going to push this, and it might do something that's, I think there's a pointer. I've done this before, but I'm not
Self-destruct button.
There it is. And I'm going to have to point to some just for the audience, but the second priority was along the south wall of the existing cafeteria. It's just a solid masonry wall. I mean, it was something that was built. If you remember, we added the cafeteria or the kitchen so we could turn that into a cafeteria. Well, there is a supervision issue. If you have students that are inside and students outside, you cannot see. And so one thing that I suggested in that was you can actually take some of the walls out, and you could replace it with some glass and even some overhead doors that we've done in cafeterias in many of the high schools where the weather is really nice. You can just open the doors up and you have free flowing inside and outside. And if the weather is hot, you can shut it down because you have the air conditioning obviously going, but you still have some visibility because of the glass. The other issue that they have there too is there's some low walls that are right along that outdoor dining area, and it just becomes a supervision issue. So we're going to look at removing those when we add this additional covered outdoor dining. The third priority was, if we're going to do all this, can we take a look at adding some possible exterior lighting so that we can help again with the security and the supervision in the evenings, whatever you might have there, to increase the lighting level out in that courtyard area, and then also bring some power out there if you're going to be using it for some different function. Because one thing that we took a look at is not just give yourself some outdoor dining area that's covered, but also can it have a dual function. And that second function would be is to take that middle courtyard area and almost create it into an amphitheater, if you will. You already have a natural kind of a rise in the terrain right there. There's an area drain, and so there's some existing concrete that's already existing there that we have a start of kind of a little platform or a stage area. We can take some of the turf out, add concrete, because we need that for if you're going to be putting up tables and so forth. You can't be sitting out in the grass area, and then cover that. And by covering that, then that gives us an area for the outdoor dining. The other thing too is that there's already the best orientation. It works in our favor because we're going to place this covered area to the south. The sun's coming around, it automatically casts a shadow across the north part of that, and so we're going to optimize some of the shade. So the solution, we came in for the first priority, is we're going to add some square footage outside to accommodate a total of about 600 additional students outside. The second priority was we're going to remove some of the masonry on the south wall of the existing cafeteria, add some glass, some overhead doors. It's going to help in the flow and also in the security and supervision. And the third is to come in and also add some power and some lighting while we're doing all this. So that's how when we sat down with the contractor, we just put together some basic sketches so that they could come up with some budget numbers so that we could find out, are we in the ballpark to meet those three priorities? And as Mr. Rouse mentioned to you, those numbers, that's what we're working with. If it is approved tonight to move forward, I'm actually meeting with the contractor and my consultants tomorrow morning to even fine-tune this some more so that the numbers can get more firm, so we know exactly where this thing's headed. Because we need to move on this. Obviously, we have this summer window. And whenever I first approached this and talked to the staff and so forth, I said, I know that we can get in there and do a lot of the hardscape, the concrete, and get some footings in for the shade areas and so forth. Depending on how quickly we can get the steel, we might get some of that up this summer. Worst case would be to finish that off whenever we get a fall break. That fall break comes around, we can come in, everything is already ready to go ahead and to put up the rest of the structures, and we can finish that up. If we can keep this moving along, we might be able to get most of it done this summer, and so that's kind of basically a schedule that we're looking at. The contractor's already on board and is ready to move as soon as we have approval, we can do so. So I'm here to answer any questions that you might have, and I'd entertain those right now.
Might help if I turn my mic on. In your timeline, will there be some some safety issues once the kids go back to school, or would that would be a concern?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, that's also a number one priority.
Okay.
And there will also be some safety safety things put into play, even when they're not there, because that's just construction.
Right.
But we clearly know that we have to have that site in a certain condition whenever they come back. They might be able to get in and do some things over weekends. You might have some early dismissals, some long weekends, but they know clearly how to operate on an occupied site, and that's very important, yes.
Okay. And I want to clarify for anybody who's just checking in for the first time, this money is the bond money that was approved clear back in '06, and so this was one of the original projects that was listed on that bond to finish out the high school area right there. So I just wanted to clarify that it's not new money, it's not anything that we found. It's been there and it's only allocated for that purpose. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Tori, because I didn't know that. Thank you.
So this has been an ongoing project. This is the courtyard. I'm trying to orient. This is I'm seeing the circle at the bottom. That's kind of the roundabout in front of the office.
That is correct.
Okay.
So the building on your left would be the two-story that you see
Okay.
a little front of that. And then the building on the right is where the classrooms and lecture hall.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's that central area that we have a pretty good-sized turf area already in place, and now we're going to make additional use of it and turn it into something.
And put the awning, put the cover,
That
the
is
shade
correct.
structure
So-
over that. Okay.
So obviously, the pieces of equipment that be used out there for dining could be moved out of the way, and now you could have a function in there, an outdoor function. If you want to have a small performance, a lecture, the community can use it. So it's not just a grass area. It functions as, first of all, as the outdoor dining, but second of all, it's kind of like an amphitheater.
And is this covering that just directly south of that there's like a rectangle area? Is that new covering? I know there's grass there now. Are you putting in something there? Is that what I'm seeing there?
I'm going to put, can you
Yeah.
guys see this screen?
Yeah.
Or maybe the
Well,
one behind you?
Tell me where you're pointing.
Are you talking about this area right here?
No, right there.
Right here?
That, yeah.
Yes, right now, that is all granite, and we're going to regrade that. And right along this line here is where that low wall is. We're going to remove that between each one of these columns. So when you come out, you'll be able to utilize all this area, and we're going to cover that too. And so, yes, and that'll all be in concrete, but it'll be covered concrete. Use the concrete, obviously, because it's easily washable and, for eating and that type of thing. So,
And it'll be covered.
yes.
Now, there's a grade up, isn't it?
We're going to
Okay.
regrade that in there. Yes, and that's part
Okay.
of the cost. Yes.
All right. Oh, that'll look nice.
What will the seating capacity be undercover?
The seating capacity undercover, including what's existing there, is
600.
close to 600. And so with that and with the interior, you can, if you get up to 1,800 students, you still want to have 2 lunch periods, we can accommodate that. Yeah.
Except if it's bad weather.
And at one point, you were talking about misters. We're not doing misters. I mean, I personally don't like misters because they mess up my glasses, but I'm just.
Mine too.
Okay.
I think the other thing too that you're getting into is because a lot of the structure is out of steel, which is lower maintenance, but then you start adding water,
It's maintenance.
it becomes
yeah.
maintenance. And so we weren't really looking at that.
No, I'm happy to hear that.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Don?
Will there be, and we're not going to put misters up, but will there be like fans or anything to move the air underneath those structures?
At this particular point, we don't have it in the budget.
Okay.
Obviously, it's going to be open on all sides, so unless there's not a breeze, you're not going to get anything. One thing that is a line item in that cost was to include some money to provide not only some electrical, like I mentioned, but also maybe some power and so forth in that one large canopy that if you want to come in and add some
Fan or whatever.
lighting, additional lighting, some even projectors and a screen. I mean, it gets kind of crazy, but if you put in at least the infrastructure initially, which is not a large dollar item, at least try to get that in right now, so you don't have to tear something up later.
So there will be lighting underneath?
Yes. Oh,
in
absolutely.
underneath these structures?
That is correct. We'd have to
Okay.
do something because if you have something in the evening, open house or
Right.
whatever, public using it, and it's dusk or it's dark out, we need to light that, yes.
Okay.
But because of that structure, we can also add something on the structure that would light out the courtyard area around it.
Okay.
And that would add to some of the lighting that's a concern right now that's missing.
So there'll be power outlets at both
Yep.
places at sites, okay?
Yes. Yeah, one thing from a food service, they were looking at, if we did something like that, they might have the possibility of moving some carts out in that area where they can plug them in. It might aid and help in some of the serving of the food and so forth. I think the whole idea, and obviously another priority, but it could fit in this budget, is to try to give it a little bit more of that campus feel of being able to go out and eat outside, like you see in a lot of college campuses or junior college, and even doing something inside the cafeteria where I know that you need it for the athletic side of it, but it's kind of missing the ambiance of the dining side of it. You see in a lot of high schools. just with monitors, TV monitors and things like that, that the students are interested in, so.
Don, don't push the budget up.
I didn't push the budget up, I said that's
Okay.
something in the future, yes. I'm not, that's not part of the number, yeah.
Payback for being last on the agenda?
Yes.
I think it sounds amazing. Thank you for presenting that to us.
Okay, thank you.
I'm excited to have that all be usable space. So, and I'm excited to see you come in under budget. Wouldn't that be awesome?
It's
All
always a
right.
struggle.
I know.
I move that we approve the outside eating area located at the high school.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. Is there any last-minute discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for staying and presenting that.